Zhou Tianhao took Claire to his office, and the moment the door closed, there was a burst of heat in his eyes. He quietly locked the door and then invited Claire to sit down on the sofa. Claire looked cramped and sat opposite him with her hands folded. Zhou Tianhao smiled and asked, "Ms. Wilson, I don't know if you came to me this time. What cooperation do you want to talk to me about?" Claire was a little embarrassed and said, "I'm telling you that Mr. Tianhao, our Wilson Group's cash flow is a bit tight recently, so I want to ask you, can you first let us credit a batch of building materials?" "Account on credit?" Zhou Tianhao said with a look of embarrassment. "As for the situation of our Tianhao Building Materials Group, Ms. Wilson, you must be aware of it. We never pay for credit or send out materials first. Get materials but first release the funds." "I know," Claire said apologetically, "I really can't help it, but you can rest assured that the company we cooperate with is Grand Group, which is the largest company in Orus Hill. They will definitely not default on our projects. As long as the payment is paid back, then we will fill in the material payment for you immediately." Zhou Tianhao chuckled and said, "That's what I said, but Ms. Wilson, I'm not targeting you. Do you know why I set the rule that no credit is allowed?" Claire shook her head. "Why?" Zhou Tianhao said, "I was also very good at talking before. Customers have to get the goods first, and then settle the settlement later. I also agreed to expand the business and maintain the relationship. All customers said that as long as Party A settles it for them, they will settle the settlement immediately. But what happened? I lost more than 300 million in payment and they haven't returned it yet." "So much?" Claire was also stunned by this number. All the assets of the entire Wilson Group add up to just over 1 billion. Unexpectedly, Zhou Tianhao couldn't collect more than 300 million in payment for goods alone. Zhou Tianhao sighed and said, "There is no way." These partners who are reluctant to settle the account using the same rhetoric. They all say that they will give me soon and immediately, but they just don't in reality. Speaking of this, Zhou Tianhao shook his head and said with emotion, "In the end, there is really no way. I cannot stop all credit cooperation channels. You can get the goods. I have more goods here, but you must pay first." Claire's expression was particularly disappointed. It seemed that this matter could not be settled the way she wants. However, she also knows that since others have this principle, it is not good to tell them to give up the principle, so she stood up and said, "I'm really sorry, Mr. Tianhao. I will go back and talk to my grandmother. I should raise funds as soon as possible. Come to work with you then." When Zhou Tianhao saw her getting up to leave, he immediately said, Oh. Don't worry, Ms. Wilson." With that said, Zhou Tianhao hurriedly stood up and continued, "What I said just now was for ordinary partners, but with Ms. Wilson, naturally I have to count it separately." Claire asked with some puzzlement, "Mr. Tianhao, what do you mean?" Zhou Tianhao squinted his eyes and looked at Claire greedily. To be honest, Claire is so beautiful. The beautiful ones make Zhou Tianhao out of breath. In all these years, Zhou Tianhao faced the yellow-faced woman at home, and that ugly and shriveled woman was 1,000 miles worse than Claire. Claire looks impeccable, and her figure is even more irritating. Such a woman is simply the best. Why can't he have such a blessing? Why should such a superb woman marry a famous waste in the city? Is her rubbish husband stronger? Thinking of this, Zhou Tianhao seemed to have countless ants crawling around some parts of his body. He felt that he hadn't had a chance to cheat for so many years, let alone touch the best beauties. Seeing that half of his life had passed, he had been paying tribute to the disgusting yellow-faced woman. Today is the best opportunity to break the shackles of fate. Correct. He wants to try this girl in front of him. Try this super beauty that all men in the city are crazy about. Thinking of this, he smiled and said, "Oh, Ms. Wilson, since you have this need, then we can have a good chat. I am Tianhao, not as bad as you think." Claire thought there was a play, and hurriedly sat down and asked with joy, "Mr. Tianhao, would you like to give us building materials on credit?" Tianhao deliberately didn't say everything thoroughly, but rather vaguely said, "If it's someone else, I will definitely reject it directly, but if it's Ms. Wilson, then I can consider it." Claire hurriedly said, "In fact, our cooperation with Emgrand Group is really close. If you give us the building materials on credit, we will be able to give you the money immediately after the first batch of settlement from Emgrand." Tian Hao nodded and said, "Wait for me, I will make a pot of tea and we will talk over it." With that, he got up and went to take out a teapot from the cupboard. With his back facing Claire, he put the tea in the pot while taking out a box of sleeping pills from his pocket. He usually took this box of pills by himself. He had some insomnia recently. The doctor prescribed some powerful sleeping pills for him. One pill will basically give him a good night's sleep. Tian Hao wanted to take the opportunity to handle Claire in the office, so he put 6 sleeping pills in the water. In this way, as long as Claire drinks a cup of tea, it is basically equivalent to taking medicine. When the action of medicine comes up, isn't she at the mercy of him? You can put her to sleep first, then use your mobile phone to take some exposed videos and photos, and then use this to blackmail her for good.